Hello again, everybody. You're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. The Metropolitan Police have launched a nationwide criminal investigation into the Post Office Horizon IT scandal. Apparently, 80 officers involved. No prosecutions till 2026, though. Let's speak to Simon Goldberg, senior partner at Simons Muirhead Burton. Hi, it's good to see you. You were there last Friday, for the third and final day of evidence from the former chief executive. What were your thoughts?
It was a very compelling day. One can watch the inquiry on YouTube, and that in itself is interesting, but being there in person was revelatory because you're there in the bear pit. Paula Vanel's was a few metres away, and there were probably dozens, 50 or so sub-postmasters in the room with you, and their sense of outrage, their calm demeanour, but nonetheless watching everything that's going on was palpable. It was very moving, actually, to actually be there, and were you not there in person, you wouldn't have seen that or felt that. And there were gasps and oohs and ahs, and when she was speaking, when she was in flow, and she said something that they didn't like, you could tell much more than if you were watching it at home on YouTube.
What did you make of her evidence? I should say that you represent some of the families.
I do represent some of the sub-postmasters.
Yeah.
I mean, her evidence, looked at clinically from a lawyer's perspective, is that she was very well trained. She's obviously fearful of the consequences that might follow, and lawyers and PR consultants and people have trained her to speak in a certain way. I wasn't really convinced by the evidence, to be honest with you, because the barristers who were cross-examining her found a number of inconsistencies, and they actually, several occasions, she tried to explain something and justify her actions in 2013, 2014, 2015, and the contemporaneous evidence, the email she wrote at the time, completely flew in the face of that.
You have written to the Lord Chancellor, I believe, Alex Chalk, is that right?
I haven't actually written to the Lord Chancellor. I've spoken about the Lord Chancellor and what I think he ought to do, but I haven't written to him directly.
So maybe you will. What should he do?
Yeah, I think that what he should do now is, following really the example of the blood scandal, with the blood scandal, it's taken many decades too long, and I'm not here to talk about that, but there is clarity in the route to compensation, and that is sorely lacking in the Post Office scandal. Considering that this, started in the late 90s, it's really time for them to do exactly the same as what they've done in the criminal prosecutions, which is to overturn them all. And the analogous behaviour in terms of compensation would be to pay meaningful interim, no holds barred, no strings attached payments, so that postmasters and postmistresses and their families, some of whom live still in extreme poverty, can just get on with their lives.
Meantime, the lawyers are doing very well out of all of this.
Sadly, Kay, rather too well for my liking. I'm not going to get too stuck into ethical issues here on your show, but I will say this. It's not the legal profession's finest hour, either for solicitors or for barristers. And there are professional rules that bind us, and some of the solicitors acting for the Post Office seem to have forgotten them. So, for example, if there's a conflict between doing the best you can for the client and what you should do in accordance with your ethical rules, ethics should prevail every time. Unfortunately, a lot of the solicitors' firms and barristers who are acting for the Post Office paid lip service to that and just told the Post Office what they thought management would want to hear.
So what can happen to change that around?
What can happen?
What can happen to change that around?
Or
are we too far in now? We've spent so much money on lawyers.
Yeah, well, I think that, we're not too far in. I think what can happen is an independent body needs to be set up. At the moment, the Post Office is acting as a judge, jury and executioner. The same old lawyers are still acting for them. And I think what's needed is new room. So an independent body that comes in and dispassionately and objectively looks at what the Post Office has done, looks at loss of earnings and so on for the sub-postmasters and approaches it with a new broom. And the Post Office should also instruct new external lawyers who aren't tainted by what's happened before.
May I ask you what you think will happen to Paula Vanel's?
That's a very difficult question, Kay. There's lots of speculation...
May I ask you what you think should happen?
Thank you. Yes, there's lots of speculation around Paula Vanel's. To some degree, she's become the poster girl of the scandal in all the wrong ways. I don't think that she should be scapegoated, and I think there's a lot more people to blame than just her. What I think, not specifically talking about her, because I think that prosecutors and relevant authorities will look at what should happen to her or shouldn't happen to her. But what I think more broadly is that directors need a boot. Directors need to learn how to run companies properly, and critically, they should be held to account. So more directors disqualified, more rigour of non-executive directors being listened to, that kind of thing. What will happen to Vanel's, it's too tight a call to say, I would say.
And more lawyers should give themselves a long, cold look in the mirror.
I think so. I hope that this is a real wake-up call for my profession. I'm proud and honoured to be a member of the solicitor's profession, and there are many, many wonderful practitioners, not least in my firm. But this needs to be a wake-up call. Solicitors need to feel the sanctions. Some of the solicitors' regulatory authority that govern us, they need to get a crack on as well and start to take sanctions against solicitors who have also contributed towards this terrible scandal.
OK, well, let's hope they're listening. It's good to talk to you.
Thank you, Kay.
Thank you very much indeed for
Thank you.
joining us on the programme this morning. Thank you.